Welcome back to Kevin Toll Reads. I hope you're doing well. I am going to try something a little different for Saturday Shorts this week. Maybe more discussionary, more of a discussion rather than more structure, I guess you would say. And so, first and foremost, let me set the stage. I have to thank Joseph from Joseph Reads Books. He is the one that gave me the inspiration to try out some short stories from author Fredric Brown. I watched a video from Joseph about 4 months ago where he talked about it's kind of a you should be reading Fredric Brown, kind of a why you should be reading type of video that I do, and I thought it was really, really good. I will link the video below. You can check out. If you haven't checked out Joseph's channel, he's fantastic. Really learn a lot when I watch his videos, which is kind of the channels I kind of gravitate towards where I'm learning stuff. It's not about just, oh, I should try reading that book, but also getting backstory and history, which I'm trying to incorporate in my videos as of the last couple months as well. So thanks, Joseph. I am really excited to talk about these. I didn't love every short story, but man, there were some highs in these, and I'm excited to talk about them. So I wanted to maybe do a discussion kind of style video rather than my normal kind of video. So I hope you like this. If you don't, let me know. But yeah, before we get started, I want to give you some fun facts about author Fredric Brown. Born in 1906, passed away in 1972, was known as the master of the short story. And that's very interesting because we're going to talk about one. He also was known for very clever and twisted endings, which I think is really, really cool. He worked as a proofreader, a typesetter, as well as a detective magazine editor before becoming a writer. His science fiction often blends mystery, humor, and horror, making him very unique among pulp writers. Another thing that I've been finding too, as an aside about pulp writers, is a lot of them put out very succinct, very economical stories because they're paid by the story, and the more they can put in front of a magazine or a publisher, the better, because they weren't being paid based on cachet. They were just trying to put out quality but more quantity. And so that makes a lot of sense. I love pulp writing. I think it's fantastic. But I thought I would throw that out there. Brown was famously adverse to writing long novels. He preferred short stories that he could finish quickly. Again, as I said, Fredric Brown is one of the few pulp writers admired equally for mystery and science fiction by fans. He influenced the Twilight Zone and other mid-century science fiction television with twist-heavy storytelling. He has been praised by authors like Philip K. Dick and Stephen King for his innovative and economical style. And so I read 5 short stories from Fredric Brown, 2 of which are very short. One is like a page, and 3 are the nice length of 20 to 40 page length. So I had a nice little selection. 3 of these short stories, Happy Ending, The Star Mouse, and Keep Out, are on Project Gutenberg, where you can get them for free. However, all 5 of my short story selections are available on YouTube as narrated stories, which you can listen to for free. So all you gotta do is check out the title, and it'll come up and you can check it out. So really interesting stuff. You don't have to go spend any money to get a nice little selection here. So I thought that I would share that as well. So let's start with story number 1. It is Arena, a famous short story for Fredric Brown, one that he's well known for. It was published in the June issue of Astounding Science Fiction magazine in 1944. Arena is, the summary of this is, you have Earth. It's on the brink of annihilation with an alien race known as the Outsiders. Rather than allow a full-scale kind of war that would wipe out both species, there's this super intelligent kind of godlike entity that intervenes. And it chooses one representative from the human race on Earth, and it chooses one representative from the Outsiders to duel. And it kind of creates this bubble in space-time and this arena, and it's a dome, and there's a force field that's between them, but it does not stop until one of the other are dead. And so they have to figure out, with very limited, no tools, no weapons, try to figure out how to take out the other one, figure out what the force field is, and they have as much time to do so as they please, because this reality that's created for them to decide the fates of one species versus the other kind of sits outside of our normal reality of time. So everything, with us is kind of frozen, and everything that's going on can last a lifetime or 100 years, and it's not going to think it's going to be like a second over here. Very interesting concept, really, really interesting. It's so interesting that the story arena inspired a famous Star Trek episode that was in 1967, loosely adapted after the short story, which I thought was really interesting. There's a lot to uncover in terms of what I liked. The writing's fantastic, and I can talk about that ad nauseum throughout here. I really like the premise. I like Carson, who is the human representative that has to figure out how to take out this outsider, and the outsider has some kind of intelligence to it as well, but is a very interesting creature in and of itself. There's just a really Star Trek vibe to it. Now, bear in mind, I have not read a ton of Star Trek, even though I have a bunch of novels back here, and I haven't watched a Star Trek in a while. I was very much a younger gentleman, but it definitely brought back some of those vibes in the story. His writing is superb, as I mentioned, very economical, straight to the point. I really enjoyed some of the inner thoughts. He does that really, really well, which is very prevalent in science fiction stories. And it just really works really well as a premise, a one versus one outside of our reality. The conflict, the climax, and kind of how this ends is really well put together. I gave this a 4.5 out of 5. And so the next short story is Happy Ending. Published in 1957, Happy Ending is by Fredric Brown and Mac Reynolds. It is one of the 5 short stories that I liked the least. The summary of this, it's a weirdly written story about 4 men, they're officers in uniform. One officer, goes by the name of Mr. Smith now, realizes the war's over and he is left to a planet, Venus. And I don't know if this is our Venus, but it is a planet called Venus. He encounters a race called Kifs, and these Kifs are like these ant-like predatory insects. And he encounters them on several different occasions, and when he last encounters them, they are just tearing him up, biting him. He is ripping off his clothes, trying to get away. He also realizes that he's not alone because he hears drumming in the distance. As he's trying to evade these Kifs that keep biting him and are pestering him, he makes his way through the jungle and comes upon this kind of primitive race. And he tries to establish his dominance as being number one, I am your god now type thing. And it doesn't come across very well. The primitive race can't understand a little bit of his dialect because we come to find out that they had a human being there before that also was sharing with them that they need to worship and act in a Christian manner, that there is a Jesus, that there is a God above in the heavens, and that is kind of their religion. And so what he does not work for them. But he is hoping, however, this officer, that this primitive race will be his salvation. But what he doesn't understand is with salvation comes horror. And that's the premise of this without getting into spoilers. Again, it's the weakest of the 5 short stories I read in this collection from Fredric Brown. I liked some things, and I'll talk about that. I liked the premise of the Kifs, the insects. I liked the religious aspect, this primitive race. I like the fact that this war that is over and it puts him on this world it's ambiguous in a way, but it kind of works. Why I didn't like it though is just it wasn't anything that really grabbed me and had me invested throughout. I was mildly interested, but at best it was lukewarm. Yeah, I mean, there's great writing. The writing is still there, even though the premise really didn't grab me. I will say that. But yeah, it's definitely the weaker of the 5. I gave it a 3.5. Story number 3, though, was a huge resurgence back to form, at least in my enjoyment. It is The Star Mouse. It was published in the 1940s. I actually did my research. I went online. I couldn't find out exactly when it was written, but it's in the 1940s. The summary is we have Mitke Mouse, a gray mouse. He goes by the name Mitke because he is in the house by the refrigerator that he has access to because there's a hole and he has a hole in the wall. He is in this house with, I guess, the house owner, who is a professor by the name of Professor Oberberger. And Professor Oberberger is developing a rocket. He is aware of Mitke. He calls him Mitke, but it comes across as Mitke because of Professor Oberberger's heavy accent, because what he is actually saying is Mickey Mouse, Mickey, but it comes across as Mitke. And so that's very interesting. What he wants to do is put Mitke in this rocket that he's building because he wants to see if he can send a living being up through the Earth's atmosphere by rocket to the moon. And Mitke is the perfect specimen to do so because he's so light, semi-intelligent type thing. And so the professor's building this rocket. He puts Mitke in it. He sends him up. And he has a very large telescope that he is tracking progress, calculating where Mitke will be. And then following day, after staying up late into the night watching the progress, he comes back to the next day and tries to find where Mitke should be based on his calculations. He can't find Mitke. He can't find Mitke where he thinks he should be based on his calculations, and he doesn't understand why. He ends up finding him off course, and he sees that the rocket is no longer heading towards Earth, what it is spiraling, and he doesn't understand why. What ends up, we find out, is that it's spiraling because it's being pulled on by something that is not there in terms of the naked eye. Based on what Professor Oberberger is seeing in his telescope, it's clear skies. There's nothing that should be impeding it between the moon and the Earth. It's escaped Earth's gravity. What force is acting upon it? And that's in the story where we get to meet the Praxilians. And so that is kind of the summary of this without going into spoilers. I was hooked from the beginning on this. There's so much that I enjoyed. I liked Professor Oberberger. I liked Mitke the mouse and his mannerisms. I liked the fact that we had a really interesting idea. A premise of shooting a mouse to the moon was very interesting. Some of the dialogue is just fantastic. I was really heartfelt, kind of warm, cozy kind of feeling, but we had kind of a, is he really going to do this with this mouse type thing, shoot him up into the moon? And so everything about it was just really drew me in. I was heavily invested. And then we get to find out why the rocket is acting the way it does. And that's when the story kind of has a second wind, so to speak. And that premise in and of itself, along with the climax and the conclusion to the short story, is all super interesting and is tied up and really well done. It just all works really well. You have these Praxilians, you have Mitke, the rocket, Professor Oberberger, what's going to happen. It all comes together really, really nicely. I gave this a 4.8 as a short story, and it's a huge score because I went back and looked. It is the second highest short story I've rated for 2025. It is tied in second place at a 4.8. So really liked The Star Mouse. The fourth short story is titled Century. And it is a short story that Fredric Brown wrote in 1954. It is about a page long. If you listen to this short story on YouTube, if you go in and type Century Fredric Brown, it takes like 3 minutes to be read to you. And yeah, it is an interesting one. It is an ambiguous short story in that the story kind of describes the soldiers trudging through desolate terrain of a war-ravaged planet. He's exhausted, lonely. He's reflective about this endless battles his people, his race has been fighting against a brutal, inhuman enemy. The soldier thinks about the hardships for his race, what he's endured, and about how the alien the enemy is. And then the end of the short story flips everything on its head. And so yeah, that's all I can really say because you don't really learn. You don't get names, you don't get really places. It's very vague and it works really, really well. Um, yeah, as you're reading it, you kind of have a sympathetic vibe towards the person that you're reading about, the protagonist, I guess you would call them. Their plight. It just really kind of sucks you in, and then the ending just kind of hits you over the head. And yeah, that's all I'm gonna say. I really liked it. I gave it a 4.1. I thought it was a really good kind of short story. And again, it takes like a couple minutes to read. So yeah, really like that one. And then my last short story from Brown was Keep Out. It was published in 1954. The summary of this one is Daptine, the miracle drug. So we find out that there was a chemist and he created a miracle drug called Daptine. And what this miracle drug does is it lets young humans acclimate to Mars in its rough environment, whether it's the lack of oxygen, the temperatures, and the gravitational forces, etc. And so they start giving this drug to children who are in a dome in an environment on Mars. And they lived the first 5 years on Earth. They were transported to Mars and they have lived 5 years in this dome. And they're living in the dome for the next 10 years. And slowly over those 10 years, they spend more and more time out of the dome, getting acclimated to Mars and letting the course of being administered this drug take effect so they can colonize Mars, basically. And so they are learning how, to not need spacesuits, how to be able to breathe, how to cultivate their own food, work outside in the temperatures, etc., and deal with everything that is the environment of Mars and space. Whereas the people teaching these things to these young adults and children are people that are in spacesuits that have to have all of these other safety protocols because they are not taking the medicine. And what ends up happening creates a rift between who's on and who's off the drug. And that's kind of the premise of this. I liked how Brown set this story up. We jump kind of back into the details as we get closer to the present. It was kind of one of those stories where you jump around and kind of time and you get caught up through kind of back looking, back flashes type thing. I thought that was really, really well. I liked the short but succinct backstory about the chemist named, I think it was Weymouth, who discovered Daptine. And while doing his studies, I thought that was interesting. I thought it was really cool as well that these kids are able to eat things that would be poisonous to humans because of the medicine. There's just a really lot of interesting elements in this story and its premise. There was no really characters that you're kind of falling in love with here. It is more of a plot-driven story, and it works really, really well. I gave this one a 4.2. Definitely really enjoyed it. Overall, I think if you are a fan of classic kind of golden age science fiction, if you are a reader who enjoys kind of Star Trek tales, if you're a fan of kind of short, ironic, twist-driven stories, you're going to really enjoy Fredric Brown's short stories. However, if you're looking for like deep character development, or if you don't like pulp writing, or you're wanting kind of more complex descriptions of setting scenes or aliens, or more space opera type, definitely this isn't your jam. I really enjoyed this. Thanks again to Joseph at Joseph Reads Books for kind of putting me on to Fredric Brown. I am heavily interested in reading him. And yeah, I have now a longer list of things I need to get to and read, but that's always a good thing. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed this kind of different style, discussionary style, and I will talk to you all in the next one. Thanks.